Hello and welcome to The Love Vibe, a podcast hosted by Angela and Key. This podcast will explore and celebrate the stories and the storytellers that make us human and connect us. The stories of triumph over adversity and trauma. We will also explore our relationship to ourselves, to others, our environment, and we'll also look at astrology. We are two women from the African diaspora whose lives have taken us to Melbourne, Australia. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future. We welcome you to join us. Now, let's start the show. Welcome. This is the first podcast for The Love Vibe, and we're really happy for you to join us. This is our beginning, and beginnings for all people are important. And I found that beginnings for me have been really critical. And obviously, beginnings, when they go well, they make us feel good. They make us feel capable. They make us feel understood. They make us feel a little bit more relevant. And so it's great that, we recognize this beginning. And when I looked at the word beginning, I was like thinking, well, where does the word beginning come from? And obviously it's a point in space and time, but it's also at the start, which is what we imagine. But we also use beginning in the way like they came from humble beginnings. And there is something about our backgrounds and who we are. So this podcast is actually going to talk about, the fact that this is our first beginning, but who are we? And actually that's what we're going to do. And beginnings are important. So instead of asking where should we begin, we're just going to begin at the beginning. Well, who are we? Who are we? Key, I'm going to ask you, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, isn't it? It's almost it's almost loaded because it's like, where do I start?
Where do you start?
What is the actual beginning of me? Like, where do I begin and all of that jazz? So yeah, I mean, in terms of what we've talked about and sort of our vision for how this is going to go, I think I'll start with my family, because that is sort of the beginning of my story. And I've done a lot of work over the past couple of years trying to figure out exactly who my family was, who are these people, where do they come from, what sort of trials and tribulations they went through, all of those sorts of things. And it's been epic.
Really?
Yeah, like I've done I kind of started it out with the whole DNA testing situation.
Wow.
And so so I was actually able to, because coming as an African American, because I was born in New York, but kind of grew up by way of Texas. And
by way of Texas.
Yeah. So my mom moved us down to Texas when I was quite young, probably about 5 or 6. Was when I ended up in Texas. But the influence of New York was always there. Like I'm not even, I don't know, I don't even really consider myself Texan because like my family is just very entrenched in that New York culture. And the way they speak and act and how they navigate the world, everything's very, New York. But so I started the journey doing the DNA testing. And as an African American, that was a very important piece of the puzzle for me, specifically because we don't really have our sort of African history down. Like we don't really know because the whole slavery thing.
Yeah.
So that was really big for me. That was huge. I traced and then I also did the African matrilineal ancestry package. And that was great because that traced my maternal line back to Sierra Leone, the Timni tribe. So that was really cool. I was able to dig into that and kind of get some insight onto my maternal line. And then from there, it was just looking at my grandparents and seeing sort of where they came from. And my paternal side is all from North Carolina. So with that, it sort of has those Southern, like I still have those Southern roots because my maternal side is from Virginia and New Orleans.
Okay.
So
Wow.
there's all these maternal, like, or maternal and paternal sort of Southern roots that kind of come through. And a lot of that for us came through, I feel like, the food as well. So it was
Yeah.
like just growing up in, I don't know, smothered pork chops was like a thing with yams and mac and cheese and collard greens and all these like it just
Yeah.
takes me so, all the way back home sort of thing.
Mm.
And yeah, so through them, I kind of figured out, yeah, I guess where I came from, because looking at sort of the trials and tribulations that they had to go through from slavery to Jim Crow and
Mm.
segregation and all of these things. And it took a while for me to really move past the sort of, I come from slaves. It was a
Yeah.
sad sort of story initially for me. And
Yeah.
then through all the research that I did and
Mm.
sort of looking at it, it's like, no, this is a story of resilience, of strength, of
Yeah.
courage, of, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Because a lot of people like to think that like Black Americans didn't sort of, fight. Like there's always the saying, I think, going around. So, I am not my ancestors. And it's like,
Mm.
you are, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, don't
Yeah.
think your ancestors were a bunch of punks. Like that is not the case. Like if
Mm-mm.
you actually knew your
Yeah.
history, especially Black American history, there were a
Yeah.
lot of uprisings. There were a lot of protests. There was a lot of, I'm not going to take this shit from you anymore, sort of thing. So
Mm.
after learning all of that, I realized, okay, that's where I come from, and that's the sort of narrative that I choose to hold on to, because
Yeah.
in the States we don't get all those stories, right? They kind of
Yeah.
bury those things under the ground. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was part of me sort of figuring out, who I am. And now that I've got two children
Yeah.
of my own, it's like now my job, I'm at a
Mm.
sort of another new beginning for myself, because it's like taking
Yeah.
that history and saying, okay, we're going to change some
Mm.
things,
Mm.
because a lot of this no longer serves us anymore. And I don't want my kids to grow up with these sets of traumas or beliefs or,
Yeah.
what have you, that were used to, I guess, sort of protect us back then, but is now no longer necessary. So, yeah. So,
Mm.
as for me, yeah, I'm a mom of two. I've got two little ones. I'm a marketer.
Yep.
And yeah,
You
I am.
certainly are. Yep. You're very good.
Oh, thank you. And then I'm also, I think another aspect of it is I'm also on my spiritual journey as well. So I am sort of aligning the chakras and doing meditation and praying,
Yeah.
and and I'm also into astrology, so we'll probably talk a little bit about that at some point in during the shows or
Mm.
throughout. So we'll see how because there's a lot happening, but
Yeah.
as
There
always.
is.
But
There
yeah, so what
is.
about yourself?
Oh, well, how would I describe myself? I mean, I'd say, yeah. I mean, I was born in London
Mm.
to Nigerian parents. So they're from a tribe called the Igbo, which are in the eastern part of Nigeria. But my parents actually met in the UK. Yeah, I'd say that I am realizing that I I have a gift of storytelling and
Mm.
stories and hearing people's stories, whether that be real or otherwise, has been really important to me. I spent about 25 years as a social worker. Still kind of am, but I'm trying to get one foot out the door. And I spent probably about a decade working in adult mental health, and I did a lot of work also working with children and their families, which I absolutely loved, but just took so much from your soul
Yeah, I could
that
imagine.
I'm leaving it for the new ones. They've got the energy to kind of do it. Yeah, but I think that for me, I would say essentially I'm a storyteller,
Mm.
and I love listening to stories, and I love hearing about really about what this podcast is about, the triumphs and the things that we experience as human beings, but also as a woman and as a Black woman from the African diaspora. There are stories that, are only just being told.
Mm.
And, you talked earlier on about, your family history and about how, African Americans, the stories that they were told about who they were are incomplete.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
there is something about our stories that are only just being told. What does it mean to like be in two cultures?
Mm.
What does it, because for me growing up, it was like inside was you were in Abia land, you were in Igbo land in your
Right,
house. And then
right.
as soon as you stepped out, you then had to navigate
A
this
new world.
Angola. And I'll give you I'll give you an example. When I first started primary school, the teacher was saying, said to me, I noticed that you don't give me eye contact. And actually,
Oh.
in Igbo culture, like you're not really meant to be eyeballing people. You're not like older people. You're not meant to be looking at them right in their eyes. It's
Right.
almost seen as a bit of a not very respectful.
Okay.
You're not meant to be staring and looking at, but actually, Western culture, it's a sign of trust. You
Mm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
they think
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't, Western culture believes that if you can't maintain eye contact, that something dreadful has happened, or you are not to be trusted.
Yeah.
And it was probably then that I realized the significance of what it meant to be part Nigerian and grow up in somewhere like London.
How old were you when that happened?
I would have been primary school, so it would have been what? Would have been 6 or 7.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So you were also
and
very switched on as a kid.
well, of course I'm going to say yes.
She's like, I won't deny that.
No, because I knew that the stories that I had about my family and food and connection to my extended family and
Mm.
cultural rituals, I didn't see outside of my household. I didn't see in the wider world. So I
Right.
knew that there was, obviously different things were happening in my household, and people who looked like me and who came from places, like my parents came from, where it was the secret world of the inside of your home.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
very different, and it was very, you couldn't really see yourself outside of your community. And so I
Mm.
remember the first time that as a family we went to Nigeria, I couldn't stop watching TV, not because of anything, but there were black, newsreaders telling the weather, everything. And I was like, wow, this is so amazing. But then, everyone says to you, oh yeah, you're from London, you're still seen as a foreigner. So you're in between two worlds in kind of both
Mm.
both worlds really. And it's probably only now that I'm starting to see that actually there are some benefits to that,
Yeah.
um, about being between two cultures, because I get a lot of pride from my Nigerian culture, just that innate kind of pride about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I also get to see other parts of Western culture that I go, oh, okay, yeah, right. That's a really different way of looking at something,
Yeah.
So for me, that helps with my stories. It helps with listening to, different perspectives. And I remember as a social worker, I loved, hearing kids' narratives and
Yeah.
children's stories, and the way in which when they didn't have information, that they would make it up. They would make up the information that the adults didn't tell them. And I thought, you know what? Stories for us as human beings in all the life forms, all the different life stages,
Yeah.
is actually really important. It is.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
is really important. And the stories that I have about, who I am in terms of my family and community, there are also emotions attached to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I come from, people who are very funny. I've got like lots of you know, aunties and uncles who they don't even know that they're funny. And sometimes when they're talking, you're like, uncle, just 1 minute. You have to go outside and laugh and then come back in again because you don't want to be disrespectful. But it's like the way your use of language and like how you know, just how you communicate to me is very humorous. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this podcast because stories is everything for us as human beings.
Absolutely.
You know, it just brings like all the meaning. Yeah, so I would say I'm a storyteller. I also feel like I'm a slight sociologist, anthropologist at a push, you know, in my heart of hearts. Yeah, because I'm really curious about people. I'm fascinated about how we as human beings tell our stories, as in history, his story, and what that does. You know, when you just tell it from your perspective, you know, what that does to the generations that come down.
Yeah.
You know, but also, you know, when you understand your story, you know, I think you can I think you can be better placed. And I think when you speak your story, I think it's really powerful. Because, you know, your story is just from your perspective and you may not really have gotten all the bits correct.
Yeah. Memory does fail us sometimes.
It does.
And going back to your point about like, what did you just say? You said something along the lines of your story gives you a place. Was that?
Yeah, I think there is something about it. It puts you in context to this world, not just this world, but the people that went before you, and maybe even the people that come after you.
Yeah.
It's maybe the story is an embodiment of us. I don't know.
It's a fast. I really sort of like that play on it because for me personally, that was the sort of impetus for me to start digging into my family history. Was I felt sort of out of place. Do you know what I mean? Like I felt like I don't know sort of where I'm like, this country isn't really my country. You know what I mean? But after doing the research, it's like, oh no. We built this shit. This is our country. So, you know, so it really quite helped me sort of, figure out where I am, I guess, in life and in context against, you know, my ancestors. And then, as you said, like my place for my children as well, like you know, the lines that come down after me. So stories are imperative, you know what I mean? And I feel like when you don't, because I was in this position before as well, when you don't know your story, sometimes you don't really have a voice. Like sometimes you don't really have, you know, I guess much to say about who you are as a person because you haven't really done that work to look at, well, who am I and where do I come from and what, you know, and I know some people might be listening to this and being like, well, I'm from, you know, where I was born and, you know, blah, blah, this person and that person is my mother and that's my uncle and da, da, da. And it's like I knew those things, you know what I mean? That cursory view of who my family was, but it was like really getting to know sort of the ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors, you know, like doing that real digging back work. So yeah, and it's helped tremendously. Really.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There is a sense of pride about regardless of what the story is.
Yeah.
It's just knowing that you come from somewhere. My mum always had the saying is you didn't come from nowhere. You came from somewhere, you know, and there is something about, you know, understanding where it is that you come from, and also sometimes seeing the similarities in the people that came before you. And there is a sense of pride that, you know, as you're going about your business, walking on this planet, there's a sense of pride that, you know, that you come from somewhere and that you come from, you know, that you come from greatness and awesomeness, regardless of the story. And I think this podcast is going to help us unravel some of the stories. Yeah, and I think that's a great thing, and I'm so totally excited.
Same.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, of course.
How did you get into astrology?
Well, astrology's so I've had this question come up a couple of times with friends
Mm,
because it seems like it's a new thing for me, to a lot of people, but it's really not.
mm,
I've been into astrology since I can remember, to be honest. Like maybe middle
mm.
school is when I kind of started, and by astrology in middle school, I mean like, ooh, what's his sign and what's my sign and do they match? I mean? Just that teenage girl stuff. So I was into it from that perspective. And then kind of fell to the wayside, but kind of always in the back of my mind. Like I'm always like, I'm an Aquarius
Mm,
and this is that energy and blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of just, yeah, really forgot about it for like years. And then things
mm,
started happening, right? Like when something wants to
mm,
get your attention in the universe, it will get your
mm.
attention. So I would like walk into a bookshop and like a book would fall on the ground and like, oh, astrology book. All right. And just put that back. You know, you're like, nah, I'm not fucking with that. I'm good right now. Just random things like that. And it just it got to such a, what's the word? Like a tipping point, I guess, for me that it was like,
Mm,
okay, all right, fine. All right, we'll do this. And so,
mm,
yeah, so then I hopped back in and now that I'm in it as an adult woman, um,
mm,
I realized that it is far more than what we think it is. You know what I mean? Like people think it's like, oh, I know my
mm.
moon, my rising, and my sun sign. And it's like, no, there's a lot. There's a
Yeah,
lot more. There's all your other placements, all your, Saturn, Uranus, Mars, Pluto, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also aspects, and how those planets and energies interact with each other, if they're opposing each other, if they're conjuncting each other. There's the
yeah.
houses, there's prenatal eclipses, like there's just a lot of stuff. There's transits. So
Mm,
the way sort of like what's happening now in the universe juxtaposed against your natal chart, like
yeah,
it all plays a part. You can like read your past lives, you can, yeah, it's pretty
yeah,
intense. So
yeah,
yeah, it was just, I
yeah,
guess, how I got in back into it. It was just a calling, I think. And
yeah.
it's funny because I'm pretty sure is it astrology is ruled by Aquarius. So, so
It
it's
is.
yeah. So
It
the
is.
occult in general, like I was always gonna have so and I have, you know what I mean? Like I've studied Wicca, I've looked into paganism, I've done Buddhism. I've always sort of, and I'm very tolerant and sort of open-minded to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it was always sort of in my wheelhouse. And I even did tarot for a little bit, but
Okay.
astrology was the one that sort of kept calling. And when
Mm,
I finally answered it, it's the one that's held on the hardest or the longest or
okay.
the strongest. So
Okay.
we'll see how far it takes us.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, my perspective about how people view astrology, particularly in the Black community, is just
Mm,
like, yeah, whatever. A little bit like maybe like whatever. But
yeah.
the
Woo
stars
woo is what
were
they, yeah.
the stars were the things that people in ancient Egypt, the Kemets, the Greeks, the Romans, they were looking at the stars. And part of me thinks that if it was good enough for them, there might be
Absolutely.
something in it.
But here's the
There
thing,
might
right?
be something in it.
Every ancient civilization was into the stars.
There
Not
you
just the
go.
Egyptians, the
There you
Chinese, the
go.
Indian, Hindus,
That's so
you know what I
true.
mean? Everyone was into astrology. And so for us in this day and age, from my perspective anyway, to be like, that's woo
Yeah.
woo, none of that shit's
Mm.
true, da da da. And it's like I feel like we're missing a very big piece of the puzzle and how to navigate our lives in this human realm on earth
Yeah.
if we don't pay attention to what's going on up there, because it
Yeah.
has a significant influence on what we do, how we do it, how things interact with each other, how you interact with other people. If randomly you're feeling like, oh fuck, I can't, just whatever fears you have around certain things, like maybe you have like fears around your ability to do your job, or self-worth,
Mm.
or issues with this, you might want to check your Black Moon Lilith and see where it is. Because
Oh,
that's likely
okay.
what's causing that. So Black Moon Lilith, I think it's in Gemini at the moment. And so that's our thoughts, right? So if
Yeah,
you've been having issues, and I'm not talking to you specifically, I'm just saying in general, if someone's been having issues with like fears around their self, like around their abilities, around their talents, around who they are
yeah.
as a person and their life,
Mm,
it's Black
mm,
Moon Lilith. And when you
mm,
know that, you can control that, right? Because you can say, oh,
mm.
that's just my mind. I can dead that. I put my mind to work doing other shit. I'm like, okay, go figure out where that voice is coming from and then come back and talk to me. And
Yeah,
that's how I handle that.
yeah,
And I'm like, where's
yeah.
that voice coming from? Oh, okay, you go look for that instead of stressing me the fuck out right now. I got kids to look after, okay? I got time to be worrying about, if I'm going to do good at this job. I'm going to be fine. So yeah, that's how I navigate it anyway. I don't know. Another astrologer might tell you something different.
Yeah, because a couple of times when you had a look at my chart, there are a few things that you said, and I was like, oh my God, okay, all right, okay, yeah, there might be something in this. There just might be something in this, and I'm not a skeptic by any means, and my thought is that, certainly in the West, and certainly the prevailing thought is about, the prevalence of science, and everything's got to be scientific, and everything's, but it's just a paradigm. Before science was religion, and before religion was, all the serfdom kingdoms and all of that.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of being able to understand our world, but it's not everything.
No, it's a piece of the puzzle. Yeah.
And it doesn't, yeah, and it's not always science versus, nature. Do you know what I mean? As if they're two opposing things. I actually don't think they are. I think that you know these are some of the things that we're using to understand who we are and why we're here and what we do when we're here. Okay, so what we're meant to do when we're here.
Exactly. Exactly. And using your natal chart to help you figure those things out. It's not going to give, you know what I mean? Like, and I think people kind of want the silver bullet a lot of the times. And I'm one of them, you know what I mean? Like there was a long time where I was like, tell me what the fuck I need to do. Just tell me, you know what I mean? I'll do it. Just tell me. But it's true. That's for you to figure out. But it is sort of like the guideline or the blueprint, you know what I mean? Of your soul, of what you came here to do, what you incarnated for. If you believe in that sort of thing, if you don't, that's cool. But use it to help you figure out what's going on with you. And I promise you, if you get a good astrologer and they have a look at your natal chart, they will blow you away with something, right? Something's going to like resonate, because everyone thinks like, here's another example. Everyone thinks that like all Aquarians are the same or all Geminis are the same. So within each house is divided, is like 30 degrees for each house. There's 12 houses, 12 zodiac signs. Yeah. Each house is divided into 30 degrees. So there's a first decan, which is 10 degrees. The second decan is from, like 11 to 19. And the third decan is from 20 to 29 or 20 to 30. If your sun sign is in the first decan of Gemini, you're not the same sort of Gemini as someone whose sun sign is in the third decan of Gemini. Two different Geminis. Is me. Yes, that's you. And I'm in the third decan of Aquarius. So I'm not the same as a first degree or second or third or 10th degree. You know what I mean? Like there's levels to this shit. So it all plays a part. It all plays a part, and it's all very significant. So I wish, especially our people, was more into it, because I just I feel like, and this is probably getting a bit off topic, but I feel like spirituality is sort of getting a little bit whitewashed at the moment, because there's not very many people of color, leading the charge, say like on social media, for instance. Like most of the tarot readers, most of the astrologers, they're all white, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have an issue with that, but I just would like to see more people of color, and maybe I just haven't found them yet. So I'm gonna keep looking.
As you were talking about that, it just made me think of, you know, there's a psychologist who was called Maslow, and he, you know,
Hierarchy
the
of needs.
Maslow hierarchies of need. And I just think that sometimes when in your life you're in a space where you are, you can give yourself permission to rest and play and think, and not think about your survival, and not think about the grind, and not think about, you know, how strong am I going to have to be to tomorrow?
Yeah.
Who's going to be leaning on me tomorrow? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think there is something about when those the basic, you know, needs, when those things sometimes are not met, it doesn't give us as human beings space to do some of that more
Esoteric work.
uh, yeah, or that kind of that ability. I'm not saying that people who, you know, are not financially, you know, in difficult situations don't have the ability to reflect. It's just about the space that sometimes survival takes up, that
Yeah.
you may not, the compartment that is for all of that, well, looking up at the stars and thinking about, well, what's my connection to these things, and what's my connection to the people that came before me. You know, you might not have that space in your
Yeah.
heart and in your mind, and actually physically you may not have that space, because you might be focused or concerned about other things, rightly or wrongly. And maybe that might be a little bit of a key sometimes, you know. And I know that in the Black community there's always that tension between, these are what all the other communities are doing, why aren't we doing certain
Yeah.
things? And there is something about, I do think about, there is something there that probably needs to be unpicked, because you're not really comparing apples for apples. Do you know what I mean? You're not comparing the same thing. Yeah, I just thought that was
Yeah, no, I agree with you
the point.
on those points. I think that is a good point to bring up, and probably one that I don't think about, just because
Mm.
I make the room, if that makes sense. Like, you know, I'm not in a great financial situation. I'm not, you know, living in a palace or anything like that. Like, don't get it twisted.
What? You're not a millionaire?
See,
No.
um,
I tried to do an American accent. I don't think it went well.
sorry. I haven't heard one in so long. I
I
probably
can
could have
give
took it
you a
up.
really bad one. Try and give you a really bad one. Do you feel at home now?
That's very broad. Yeah, good job. Very broad American accent. I like it.
There you go.
But yeah, it is tough to, especially when you're in sort of that very narrow view. And the only reason why I call it, because for them it's the world, right? Like it's everything.
Yeah.
But the only reason why I call it a narrow view is because of what potentially could happen once something triggers you to, you know,
Yeah.
almost wake up
Have
a
that.
sense. And for
Yeah.
me, it's that old saying that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it's like, as soon as you hit that moment, I think that's when things start to open up a bit,
Yeah.
and you become more open to things, because it's like, you know, I want to change. And
Yeah.
sort of, I guess for me, it was sort of the dark night of the soul sort of situation, where I was just in a really low place and there
Yeah.
was nowhere else to go. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, there was nowhere. I mean, shit could have gotten a lot worse. I can admit that. But for
Yeah.
me, it was like, that was the lowest I was willing to go.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no,
Yeah.
I want things to be different. And so that's kind of how I sort of came out of that. And then I think, in terms of wanting to see more people of color sort of in these spaces, I think it's just because most of this is our shit. Most of this is our spirituality, it's our religions, it's our beliefs, it's our structures, everything, most of it anyway, not everything, but most of it is ours. And it's the same
Yeah.
for sort of Anglo groups that were
Mm.
persecuted, like, you know, Irish and Scottish and all that. all of their belief structures and their systems, everything was stripped away from them as well. And so all of these things are sort of making a comeback. It's just a little bit, you know, disheartening to see that it's repackaged to us like it's not ours. You know what I mean? Like it's repackaged like, you know, you guys should be doing this. And it's like, but hang on. Hang on. this is our shit. What do you mean? So that, I think that's where I'm coming from with it, but I get it. You know what I mean? Like it's
so it's interesting as you were talking about that, because it kind of ties in a little bit with the idea about history, but also remembrance. That actually, if you're completely focused on the daily grind and you're completely focused on just getting your basic physical needs met, you may not have the space and time to think about who you are in context, who the people that went before you, who they were, but also, you know, you may not, I suppose, have the space to even consider any of that. So there is something about, and I know this is a big jump, about, you know, in Black community, about this real idea about play and rest being revolutionary for us. The idea about stepping off the grind and, you know, taking down that thing, you know, the strong Black woman, that thing, taking that thing down, because if we continue on the grind, there may not be enough space for us to discover who we really are. You know, in the sense of, actually, this is, like you've just said, this is stuff that was already in our possession, and that we haven't remembered, and we haven't taken that revolutionary act to actually go, if I just continue doing basic, you know, my daily basic care needs, I may not be able to remember. You know, I may not be able to remember. And I was talking to one of my cousins last night, and we were talking about, you know, growing up, and that how we watched the generation before us where rest and play just never existed. Just did not exist. You know, my mum worked, and, like, if I think about it, a lot of the older women of my mum's generation, they just worked 2-3 jobs, you know, and it was that, you know, that basic kind of physical, meeting my physical needs, but also trying to create a financial foundation for the future. But it meant that we didn't get the role model of, actually, holidays are not just where you just go and waste your money and spend your money in another country. Do you know what I mean? You could be putting it towards a down payment of a, you know, deposit for a house. You know, actually, there's something in it. There is something in rest and play.
Absolutely.
And I really hope that in, you know, our generation, you know, or the ones that come after us, that we remember that in rest and play, it helps us to you know, to connect again with those things that are already in our possession.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a shift toward that behavior, because I've been seeing a lot of stuff about the, you know, the hustle mentality. No, you know, all that, don't, you know, you'll sleep when you're dead shit. And it's like, nah, you got you got to rest. So I seen, people are like not glorifying that anymore. And I'm happy to see it, because it is very unhealthy, and it keeps you out of, you know, you're out of balance in that sort of situation. And that's what we grew up with, right? Like our caretakers, our mothers, our parents were out of balance, essentially. And that's something that's so important to me now, especially now that I have kids, that they see mom sitting down reading a book. I'm having a tea. Don't fuck with me. Leave me alone.
They probably don't listen to you. They're like, yeah, whatever.
No, you know, they climb all over me, but, you know, they have a book as well. So it's, you know what I mean? So they're learning now, and they're getting to see that that side of me where it's like, yeah, mom's resting. And then they get to see what mom's playing. Like we worked out the other day together, and we, you know, go play hide and seek in the park and stuff like that. So it's, you know, which I don't really have those sorts of memories of mom. I do have memories of mom like going away into her room by herself. You know what I mean? Like she definitely took her space when she needed and wanted her space. But but you know, we weren't allowed to go into that space when she needed her space. And if you went into that space, you had hell to pay. So it better fucking be important. All right. So when my kids won't experience that, you know what I mean? Like if I am in my room doing a meditation or something, they come in, they walk around, they make a bunch of noise, and I'll ask them, come sit in meditation with me. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but it's not a, you know, you have to do this sort of thing. And it's just important. Like I said, it's just important to me that they see those things, because then it becomes normal, right? It's not weird to take 5 and meditate. And I think that's something that we've, you know, need to sort of get back to. I like to think that years and years and years ago, that's what we did. You know what I mean? Like we were more in balance, because when you think about it, like in terms of spirituality, if this is stuff that's seemingly new to us now, but that we were doing anyway, way back then, I feel like our ancestors were far more well adjusted. You know what I mean? Like, good Lord. And then especially seeing what's happening now like, I try not to pay attention to what's going on outside of my like, you know, I don't really consume a lot of media. But I can almost feel it, you know what I mean? Like the level of like ego and fear and anxiety that's kind of taking over the world right now. And it's like, there's a lot of us out of balance. A lot of us.
Yeah. And there is something about the system that we kind of live in, you know, the generation before us, they didn't just work their asses off because they wanted to.
Right.
That was, you know, it was about their expectation of themselves, but also the system that they went into, you know. Absolutely. That kind of like, I mean, London's the grind city. Everyone's working. You might have money in the bank, but everybody's working.
Yeah.
It felt to me anyway, my personal perspective, it was all about work.
Yeah.
And there is something about the systems that we find ourselves in, because, you know, our families are a system, our communities are a system, our workplaces are a system, but also, you know, we're actually in capitalism. We're in an economic system which dictates what we do for work. It will dictate, you know, what qualifications we need, what education, what are the things we're going to pursue. And then, you know, impacting your, you know, you've only got, you know, 3 weeks or a week holiday. Do you know what I mean? All of those things. Yeah. And I do remember as a social worker, like understanding social work theory around systemic thinking, like ecosystems, and like using that for families, but you can also use it, you know, for societies. You can use it for organizations. That, you know, we're made up of lots of different systems, and that they're all interdependent. And you know, I know that, you know, growing up and in like Europe and living here in Australia, you know, the idea is about the individual to an extreme, but actually our lives are actually a lot more interdependent than what we think. And actually we live in an economic system which demands things of us, you know, the contract of, you know, employment. You know, you're going to do this for that. But I can tell you, during this time, this working from home thing, I think my contract is out of balance. You know, it's like, you said you were going to give me this, and now this I'm doing this in my own home. Like, you know, but and so it's the idea of looking at us in terms of different systems that, you know, that are interdependent.
It's very interesting you bring that up, because I think if we look at sort of the COVID situation right now, I think that's, you know, kind of showing us just how interconnected we are. right? Because we have like a group of people, or, you know, a group of people that believe a certain thing, you know, anti-vaxxers, and they don't believe COVID is real, so they're not getting the vaccination. And then you have the group of people that are like, fuck, we need this vaccination. And you have like immunosuppressed people that need the vaccination, that need you to get vaccinated so that they don't, you know, catch the illness, and with their, you know, compromised immune systems, potentially die, right? So I think it's very interesting you brought that up, because yeah, I think like this moment now in history is showing us, it's kind of bucking that individuality trend that we've been on for the past, I don't know, 70, 80, 90, 100 years, or whatever it's been, you know what I mean? Like showing us, really showing us, no, you guys need each other. Like, this is you all co-create this world. And we have to sort of get to a space where we think about other people and think about how we interact with other people, and how our decisions and the things that we sort of, and I'm guilty of it. Like, I am very often self-centered. It is something I'm working on. I'm just gonna be honest.
Spill the beans.
Right. It's something that I'm working on, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, I guess, because it's been so long, you know, being in that headspace, that it's like, oh, no, now I have to sort of, you know, broaden that view and see things from other people's perspectives, and put myself in those shoes and stuff like that. Because initially I was like worried about the vaccine, and I was like, I don't know if I want to take it. Like, it's been, you know, rushed, and, you know, rah. And then I looked into it some more, and then I realized, like, no, I've got family members that are immunocompromised. I've got family members that are like, that have diabetes, that have, you know, all these other different kinds of issues. And it's like, how irresponsible of me to think that, you know, I could not do that. So it's just, I don't know, it's just a interesting sort of space we're in now, as the human race, I guess. Figuring out how we're going to navigate this.
Yeah, and I suppose, you know, it goes back to some ideas about political thought as well, about how people have inalienable rights, you know. And so the anti-vaxxers are saying, well, there's bits about the communication. Some people, anti-vaxxers, are saying there's bits about the communication I just don't understand. I'm not getting. And there are some who are just like, it's all about my freedoms, or it doesn't exist, or all of that kind of stuff. But they're the stories that everyone is telling themselves about how they're going to approach this. And, you know, who says that whose thing is valid? Do you know what I mean? Whose view is valid? And everyone just takes it on its own merit, really, I would imagine. Because there's no mandatory anything at the moment. But,
no, there's not.
Yeah, and people are just working out, okay, so what's my story in relation to, you know, what's currently going on? It's really interesting times.
It is.
It's really interesting times.
But I will say that I'm not out to vilify anyone, because I think that's where, you know what I mean? Like, people are like, if you don't fucking get the vaccine, you're a piece of shit, and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And it's like, whoa, pump your brakes.
Yeah. Sometimes you see posts like, just get the effing vaccine and just whatever. And it's like, oh my God.
And it's like, you know, if you get it, I love you. You know what I mean? Great. I'm happy for you. And I love that you made that choice. And if you don't get it, listen, I still love you. And I pray that, you know, you get to a space where you're comfortable, and, you know, everything sort of works out the way that you hope it works out. Because I don't know. I mean, and that's the thing. None of us know. No. You know what I mean? No. Like, even the scientists don't know. Like, they're still learning new shit about this. But
you know what? Whenever it's figured out, I am just waiting to go and be out in the world.
Yes.
When was the last time you went for, like, to shake your leg, have a little bit of a dance, a little, you know, have a little DJ, you know, just being out, going on holiday. Oh my God, Facebook memories.
I know.
Jeez Louise.
It's pretty painful right now.
Bringing memories of Hawaii Think, oh,
Like you might want to send Mark a
London.
message and be like, hey, turn off the memory function right now, nigga. Like, just turn it off.
Just stop. Really, just stop. Yeah, really.
My son's school had a disco party, a virtual disco party for them. So I did dance with him the other day. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I definitely miss, because I'm not a homebody. I'm not someone that, you know, just sits in the house all day. And this has been a lot. You know what I mean? And we were supposed to go to the States to visit my family in 2020. That got canceled. And then we were like, okay, we'll go next year. We were supposed to go in August. It's August. We're not there. We're on lockdown again. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, what is happening?
Last year, I had a 9-week holiday planned in Central America.
Wow. That would have been awesome.
So it would have been.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you do some virtual tours?
You know, it's probably better that I just don't look.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Wait till everything just settles, and then I'll get on a plane and go somewhere, and
do a cartwheel as soon as you land. Yeah, it's gonna be like that for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's definitely difficult. It's different times. Let's just say that.
Absolutely,
it's different times.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it all pans out as well, because astrologically speaking, we have quite a few planets in Aquarius, and you know what Aquarius is about.
Are you the sign? Are you the sign of COVID? No, I'm only joking.
I was like, wait, what?
Did you guys bring COVID here? You need to fess up. I'm ready to hear your story.
Ain't got no story about that. I know nothing about no COVID. But no, astrology. I think we have like Saturn and Uranus. No, Uranus is in Taurus. So we have Saturn, some other planet, and I think Pluto is going to be in Aquarius pretty soon. And yeah, shit's about to get live. So I think, in
which way?
Well, because Aquarian energy is about, I know. Aquarian energy is about the collective, right? It's about like humanity, all of us. It's humanitarianism, like certain aspects of it. Like it's humanitarianism, but it's also like technology. It's also like Aquarius has a lot of shit that goes around with it. But when you have like Saturn's about like control and structure, Pluto's about transformation. So when you have both of these sorts of these planets in Aquarian energy, Aquarian is also the vibration of the energy. It's how the energy vibrates as well, and it's where sort of we all belong on the on the spectrum. It's very difficult to explain. I don't have my notes with me, but my thought around it is, and I said this in my other podcast, is I feel like, and according to my spiritual coach, we're on the precipice of sort of ascension, of if we're going to ascend as a collective or not.
So when you say ascend, what does that mean?
Move to a higher vibration. So
yeah.
So like move to more self-love, you know, just more positive sort of, you know, but everyone's at different stages, right? So even when the collective ascends, it's not like on an individual basis, everyone's going to be kumbaya, my love. You know what I mean? Like it's some people might just not be criminals anymore. You know what I mean? They might get a job. It's that sort of on the individual basis. That's what I think anyway would look like. I could be wrong. I'm still learning, even though I've been around astrology for a very long time. I'm only just now really starting to kind of dig into it. And I'm still very new at it, but that's my take on it is, we're on the precipice of sort of ascension, which is, and you know, Uranus, it's funny because what's also happening is Saturn and Uranus are squaring or opposing, and or at least they were like last week. And we've seen a lot of sort of upheaval in the political structures, right? Because Saturn rules politics, control, government, that sort of thing. Uranus is rebellion energy. It's breakdown, breakthrough energy. It's like you know, we're going to shift some things around. And so that's where you see sort of the, you know, protests happen. That's that energy. That's that energy, okay. You know, working against each other, essentially. And then, you know, you have the Afghanistan situation that happened. You had the assassination of Haiti's president happen. So all of, you know what I mean? Like you can see it playing out, the energy playing out in the world. So it'll be interesting to see how once those signs are all into Aquarian energy, to see what that shift looks like. Okay. I'm waiting with bated breath.
Me too.
This is interesting.
Yeah, I'm like, what's going to happen next? You know,
I know.
What is going to happen?
I know. It's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, but, you know, the world always turns. There's always a new something. But Absolutely. you still got to hold your dreams. You still got to, you know, remember, and you still, you know, you can still, you know, make things manifest or make things become real, you know, just in tune with what you want, regardless of what's happening outside. Of course, you know, don't put your head in the sand, but yeah, there is something about still kind of, you know, doing your own thing.
Yeah, so, definitely. What would you want sort of the listeners to take away from this, if anything, if you had any thoughts about that?
Yeah, one thing is about understanding your story and how powerful it is to understand who you are, not just in relation to all the things that you've acquired, but like where do you come from? Like what stock of people do you come from? What do those people gift to your life? And just how powerful it is to tell your story and to understand it and to vocalize it. Yeah, that's what I would like people to go away with. Is the power of story, the power of narrative, and one that's yours. Not someone else's. It's yours. Yeah.
And I think those stories, our stories are still going, right? Like it don't stop.
For sure.
I'm up until this point, and I still have this many more years to go. But yeah, it would be great to see some of that in the comments. I think I would love to read about the stories of the people that are listening to the podcast. Would also be great to hear.
And if anything like rang a bell, with what might be happening for people, you know, who are, you know, engaging with this podcast, you know, is there anything that rings a bell? Is there anything that rings true?
Yeah, that resonates. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know, you know, what people want to see on this podcast as well, what they want to hear, what they want to engage with.
What do we want to talk about?
Yeah, and as we talked about in the very beginning, you know, stories coming from, you know, women like us that are only just being told, and there's a richness and a texture to those stories.